I walked into Everline Global's glass palace with 8 years of wins in my back pocket and a simple ask, a raise that matched my work. The marble floors gleamed. The boardroom windows cut the skyline like a razor. At the head of the table sat Clarissa Holt, my sister-in-law, 6 months into the CEO chair and already speaking fluent condescension. I laid out the facts. I'd built the international trade division from a skeleton into a profit engine. I landed clients in 3 time zones. I wrote the compliance playbook that kept us out of regulators' teeth. While I talked, Clarissa studied my scuffed shoes. When I finished, she smiled for the audience outside the soundproof glass. "We don't serve poor beggars here." It was loud enough for the floor to hear. The room went silent. The heat rose in my ears, and something old and tired in me finally snapped. Not into rage, but into clarity. I nodded once, turned, and walked out. She had no idea who she'd just called a beggar. What she never knew before Everline, I was an international compliance consultant, the fixer other fixers called. I built offshore architecture that moved money across borders without tripping alarms. Switzerland for processing, Singapore for Asia flow, Cayman for structured reserves. When Megan, HR sweetheart, Clarissa's sister, now my wife, talked me into joining Everline, I traded hotel life for a badge and a cubicle. The business card said project manager. The job was something else. The founder gave me a long leash. I rebuilt Everline's entire offshore nervous system, central Swiss hub, interlocked Singapore subs, a Russian doll lattice of Cayman trusts, all legal, all elegant, all dependent on one quiet detail buried in the fine print: every transfer. Over $50,000 required 2 authorizations, an executive sign-off and a primary compliance officer's digital key. That second key? Mine. I sold it as a safeguard against embezzlement. The board loved it. For 3 years, I used it responsibly, freezing bad transfers, fixing errors, making the system hum. They saw a middle manager. I held the master switch. That morning, Clarissa humiliated me for sport. That afternoon, I stopped being their guardian angel. Pulling the plug. I walked to Murphy's Cafe, 2 blocks and a world away from marble floors. Black coffee, corner table. I called Sylvia Mercer, the only lawyer I trust to do precision work without drama. "Pull the plug," I said. "Define pull the plug," she said, already typing. "All offshore accounts, freeze and transfer. Today." A beat. "You're talking 90% of Everline's liquid assets." "I know," she exhaled. "Switzerland in 2 hours. Singapore before their market opens. Cayman by close. If we move now." "Do it," I said. "Every last penny." "Understood." A pause. "What lit the fuse?" "My CEO called me a poor beggar." Sylvia, who never wastes profanity, said softly, "Jesus," and went to work. The meltdown. At 2:47 p.m., red alerts bloomed across Treasury's screens. Switzerland flagged unusual activity. Singapore called to verify comprehensive fund movements. Cayman asked for confirmation on authorized closures. Lionel, our finance lead, watched balances lurch toward zero while 3 phones rang at once. The signatures were valid. The protocols were perfect. Everything was horrifyingly by the book. By 4 p.m., the Swiss accounts were drained, Singapore queued, Cayman churning. Everline's reserves, acquisition war chest, expansion fuel, rainy day oxygen, were gone. Word sprinted up the stairs to the executive floor. Clarissa convened. A war council. Legal leafed through dusty originals. The CFO swore our security was airtight. Operations stared at the ceiling. Then legal found it. The clause everyone forgets. Primary compliance officer. Secondary approval authority. Emergency. Freeze powers, cross-jurisdiction signatory. My name. Notarized. "Get him on the phone," Clarissa whispered. No need. I walked in. The reveal. I took the seat usually reserved for the note-taker and slid a folder across the table. You want to know what I did? I said. Start with what you did at 10:30 this morning. The CFO tried diplomacy, legal tried threat. I opened the folder, procedures, signatures, timestamps. Every transfer immaculate. Every safeguard obeyed. Where did the money go? Operations finally asked. To the Harbolite Initiative, I said. A 501c3 endowment for small business grants, scholarships, and clean energy projects in underserved communities. Silence, air conditioning loud as surf. You gave away $2 billion, Clarissa said, color draining from her face. I redirected capital to human outcomes, I said. Perfectly legal, fully documented, and none of your non-competes apply to charity. I placed one last page on the table, my resignation. Effective immediately, I'll be Harbolite's Director of International Operations. I reached the door, then turned. One more thing. We created the Respect Fund. $500 a month to Dignity First community programs. Your words inspired the number. Poor beggars, you said. Now they get paid. Shockwave's markets are merciless. Algorithms saw the liquidity smoke and hit sell. The stock plunged 43% before circuit breakers kicked in. Vendors demanded cash on delivery. Shippers changed terms. Regulators opened inquiries, not because anything was illegal, but because moving that much money that fast sets off sirens. By nightfall, headlines bloomed. Executive ego costs company billions, the raise that broke the bank family feud, corporate fallout. Hashtag the Bosch poor beggars trended as workers everywhere shared stories of bosses who confused status for worth. Megan texted, "What did you do? Board wants Clarissa out. Mom says bankruptcy. Please stop." I stared at the phone, thought about dignity, and wrote back, "It's done." And it isn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't. Not really. What grew instead? While business shows argued about the greatest workplace revenge in corporate history, something better happened. Grant applications flooded Harbolite, 3,000 in 48 hours. A single mom in Detroit with a food truck plan banks wouldn't touch. Engineering students in Bangladesh building solar water purifiers. A veteran in Montana starting a renewables install company. A coding boot camp dream. A community garden with a solar-powered irrigation design. We assembled a review committee, educators, builders, social workers, sustainability pros. We funded the feasible, mentored the promising, and said no like adults when projects weren't ready. Then stayed to help them get ready. Media eventually noticed the $500 Respect Fund checks landing in after-school programs, shelters, and job training orgs. Quiet headlines replaced the noisy ones. Night school gets laptops. Clean Energy Co-op hires 6. Formerly homeless barista becomes manager. Everline's board asked for Clarissa's resignation. Bankruptcy lawyers took over. Analysts wrote case studies about catastrophic culture. I stopped reading. 6 months later. At sunrise, I unlock a converted waterfront warehouse that now hums. Like a beehive. No marble, no mahogany, concrete floors, exposed brick, cheap lights, big purpose. Maria sets up to pitch her sustainable catering startup. 3 months ago, she pulled doubles on a fry station. Jerome, a scholarship recipient, teaches teens to build apps between shifts at a clean energy firm. In the workshop, retired engineer, Frank helps kids prototype robotics. Down the hall, veterans learn solar install. In a quiet corner, working adults earn degrees on free laptops and fast Wi-Fi. Above the door hangs a plain plaque. Respect is worth more than revenue. Most people think it's a slogan. It's an invoice, paid in full. Megan and I are okay. It took time, honesty, and a clear line. Love doesn't require bowing to a culture that confuses wealth with wisdom. Clarissa, last I heard, advises companies on crisis management. Irony pays well. Every so often, a reporter calls wanting the revenge story. I tell them they're missing the point. Revenge ends a day. Respect builds a future. Turns out, when you stop treating people like poor beggars and start treating them like neighbors with potential, they don't just survive, they flourish. And that's a return no quarterly report can measure.